Hey folks, in this video I wanted to point out using the difference between having wide data and tall data, and how in some cases we want tall data and how we could convert wide data into tall data. So the first thing what we want to look at is, let's see why this wide data doesn't work for me. For instance, I want to insert a pivot table, and I'm going to put it on this existing sheet, and notice it's just finding my data A1 to K31. That's fine. And I want to insert this in that cell right there, say create. Now, if I try to use a pivot table here, I don't have a whole lot of luck. If I make a row out of teacher 1 is just giving me these lists. I can't seem to get a hold of my student data. And so it's not working really the way I would like. So if I had my data in a tall format, let's go ahead and get rid of this pivot table. I can simply click here and delete it. What I really want to do is get this data into a tall format. What I would like is to see a list of students, a list of teachers, and a list of scores. So I would see student 1, teacher 1, 72, student 1, teacher 2, 72, and so forth. I would see a tall set of data with that. Well, it turns out that there is a function that's going to help us do that, and it's the flatten function. Let's see what that does. I'm going to work with the flatten function here, and the flatten function just asks you to take a range, and it takes that range and puts it into a single column. So if I were to select this set of data and use the flatten function, well, it doesn't help us a whole lot right there. It gives us the student name, teacher 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, the student 1. So it's taking this data and putting it into a column, taking that data, putting it into a column. Well, that's not going to help me much. So we have to try to solve this a little bit differently. That's the flatten function. Let's just call this flatten. And now what I'd rather do, my next step would be to try to see if I can't put all this data together. So I'm going to start by selecting my students. I want all my students. So what I want to do is go equal to this array. And then I want to do a little trick here, and I want to, I've pasted this to my clipboard. I'm going to use a symbol. So what I really want to do is create a list of this, my students, and then I'm going to put another ampersand, and then I want to create a list of my teachers, and then I want to paste in my little symbol. And I want to be able to grab all of this data here. And so I'm going to grab all of my students, all of my teachers, and then all of the scores. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And I'm going to get an error with that because there's no array. But if I wrap this with an array formula, now it works, and what I've done is created an array with all of this data. So in this column I have student 1, teacher 1, 72, student 1, teacher 2, 72. So basically student 1, teacher 3. So I'm basically getting this set of data. Now the next step in this is that I want to flatten this. I could probably put the flatten, let's try this. I could flatten this array, and let's see if that works. It does. So my flatten formula could be right there. And now I have all of that data in a nice tall column, but that's not helping me a lot. So the next step then would be to split that data And I'm going to split that data set, all of that data. See, I might have to move my array formula. And we're going to split that with my little symbol. And let's see what that does for us. That does actually work, but my array formula is in the wrong place. So let's go ahead and move my array formula to the outside of this. I'm going to go ahead and put my array formula here. Array formula, we won't need this array formula any longer. So array formula, split, flatten, and I think we need to move this over to here. Let's see what that does for us. That's it. So my formula now is giving me, let's go ahead and shrink these down. So now my formula is giving me this whole list, and it should actually, if you look at this, it should be, well, we can count this. So I've got 300. There's 300 rows of data now. I'm going to go ahead and call this one the student. This is my student data. This is my teacher. And this is my score. And let's go ahead and widen that field up. So now I have tall data. Notice I'm going to be able to do things a little bit differently. If I go ahead and select this data set and now insert a pivot table, existing sheet, we'll go ahead and stick my pivot table right here. And let's see what we can do with this. Now I am able to, let's slide across, you can see this a little better. Now with this pivot table, I can grab my student data, and I'm going to get my student 1 through 30, and I can grab scores into my values. And now I basically have my student data. I think let's go ahead and look at the data as O1 to Q. Let's just see if that changes that for us. O1 to Q100. So yes, that does give me a sum of the scores, and of course that's not really what I wanted. I wanted the average of the scores. So now I have the average score for each one of these students. I do have an issue with this because I'm doing some blanks, so we could add a filter on the student, and showing all items we could remove the blanks. And now there's my pivot table showing me my averages. And let me just move this pivot table over to here and do that. So one of the things about pivot tables that's nice is I could copy that pivot table, and maybe I'll make myself a little space. I'll go ahead and paste that pivot table there. And now that I'm in that second pivot table, I could actually change this to teacher. And now you can see I basically built a second pivot table showing me my teacher averages. That is going to make it a lot easier for me to maybe, let's go ahead and format this to, maybe just 2 places, maybe even just one place value on that. And that would help me now go ahead and, if I wanted to, I could chart this a little bit, and that data is a lot easier for me to chart now with having built a pivot table. The other advantage of having this data in this tall format, it's going to allow me to use it in some other ways, perhaps taking this tall data and using it in a data studio project. There's values in these kinds of wide data issues, but it's also pretty nice when you have the tall data format. And what's nice is we can do all that with a single formula. And in fact, we can do this even one step further. So what we could do with this to have it just show up as a single formula, I could instead build an array literal, and let's do that. Let's take my formula, this formula here, I'm going to copy that, and then I'm actually going to I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it, and that's going to take away all of that data. And then here I'm going to type equals, open curly bracket, open quote, and then we're going to do student, teacher, and then we're going to do score. And then we're going to put a semicolon, and then we're going to paste in our formula, my array formula. We're going to finish that with the close curly bracket. And let's see, what do we have? Override in Q1. Oh, that's because I hadn't gotten rid of those. So now notice with one formula here, I am basically taking this data set here, and I'm turning it into this data set with one single formula. That's giving me all of my student ones together, all my student twos, and so forth. And when I do it that way, now I can use pivot tables. I could use a query. Let's show one quick example of that. We could run a query. For instance, we could say equal query, and the data we want to query is this little data set here. We want to query that, and we want to select. We want to select the column P, and we want to select an average. Oh, we'll just do lowercase, an average of R, and we want to group that. Let me slide over a little bit, and we want to group by P, and I think that should do it for our query. And here we have a list of, and you can see with that single formula, I have now pulled back a student average list. I would not have been able to have done that very well with my Y data. I do have an empty row in here. One way we could get rid of that is we want to select P, average R, where P is not null, and group by P. And that gets rid of our empty row. So quick look back at that formula. We're querying our new data set that we made with our tall data, made into our tall data, selecting P, average R, where P is not null, group by P. And that gives me my average scores per student of my 30 students. And finally, to show how you could actually turn this data here into a single formula, one of the things we could do is take this formula, this entire thing here. Let's copy that. Let's come to this formula. We're going to use, instead of querying PR, we're going to use that array that we built. That's going to become our data. And then the issue is that we have to switch these column headers to this format: col1, col3, col1, and col1. And that should give us, what do we do? We're going to query, select col1, average col3, where col1 is not null, group up, I misspelled col. There we go. And in a single formula, without first building our flatten array, we could put that all into a single query. And if we did that, we could now take that formula, go ahead and copy that. And now what I would want to do is to take a look at my teachers. I'm going to do that, and then all I would change here is I'm going to select col2, average col3, where col2 is not null, and sum by col2. And that gives me my teachers. So again, building our data into a tall data set is helpful to then be able to analyze it a little bit more. In this example, once we built that, we were able to use a query to pull back my teacher average scores and my student average scores with one single formula each. Now, I don't like the way the teacher average score is coming out. I can fix that. Select col2, and then what we would do is, in this case, we would format, we will format col3. Actually, that needs to be in parentheses. We're going to format the average of col3. That's what that actually is. It's the average. We're going to format the average of col3 in, this is in the wrong place, with, let's see, we want to average that. Let's do it pound dot 00 and finish out a single quote. So yes, we had a double quote in there. Pound dot 00 single quote, and then we end it. And now I have that looking the way I want. I could do the same with my student if I wanted it to be 2 decimal places. I would simply take this format average. I can grab that, and then I can come here and group by col1 and go ahead and paste that format command in there. And now I've got just what I want. I could take it one step further. If I wanted to get rid of average score and give that a different name, I could do that. So again, this is using our ability to do a quick conversion of our wide to tall data, and then using that formula inside of here to build a single formula to come up with those kinds of queries.